Hello, this is Paul Higgins, and this is Paul Higgins Photography. So, on today's session, I'd like to talk about adapters, and specifically about adapters for Micro Four Thirds cameras. So, great thing about Micro Four Thirds cameras is because the sensor is very close to the where you mount the lens. There's no mirrors and all that kind of stuff. It gives you a lot of opportunities to connect different sorts of lenses. So what I'm going to do today is talk about two different types of adapters. Anyway, but before we get started on that, first a few things about an overview of adapters that you can connect using you can connect to Micro Four Thirds cameras. First of all, most of the adapters are what I call dumb. And what I mean by dumb is there's no electrical connections between the camera and the lens and the adapter. So when you're working with these lenses, it's all auto. There's no autofocus. There's no shutter priority. So if you have shutter priority, you can't set the aperture on the lens and then the camera kind of figures out what's going on. Sorry, you can't set the shutter speed on the camera and then have the camera tell the lens what to do with as far as apertures is concerned. But one thing that's nice about the Micro Four Thirds cameras is because everything's coming directly onto the sensor, you can still use aperture priority on the camera, and that will give you good exposures, which is great. So I'll talk a little bit about each of the different two types of adapters and lenses and things once we get there. But the main things to remember is with these cheap adapters that I'm talking about, there's no electrical contacts, and there's no autofocus, and there's no automatic exposure connection to be able to set the aperture on the lens, and no mechanical connections either. So older people are thinking, haha, I can still use my really old lenses and they'll be able to connect. No, there is no mechanical connections either. So the second thing I'd like to go on to, and I'm just looking at my little cheat notes here, the second thing I wanted to talk about was some of the settings that I found useful on my Olympus OMD EM10 Mark II, which will help with using these dumb lenses. So first thing, as I mentioned to start with, was you can use aperture priority or full manual, so where you set the aperture and the shutter speed on the camera. But like I say, I've had good success with aperture priority. So that's kind of interesting. So so just to take a step back, the two adapters and types of adapter I'm talking about today is, the first one I'm talking about are these CCTV type lens and adapters, where and then the second type of adapter I'm talking about is, this is a one to allow me to connect my Nikon lenses to my Micro Four Thirds camera. So like I said, you can either use aperture priority or manual exposure, automatic aperture priority, or manual exposure, manual exposures. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, so there's a bunch of settings, and I'll paste into the comments what these are, but just to go through them very quickly. The first one is focus peaking. I've used that a little bit, and if you're not confident with focus peaking on the Micro Four Thirds cameras, you might already have it enabled. Excuse me, but if you're not using it, it's kind of handy with these lenses where you don't have any other clues about focusing apart from just looking at the electronic viewfinder. So the two settings for peaking that I use are in the autofocus manual focus options. I go manual focus assist and then select peaking. That's the first part. The second part is because there's no electrical connections between the camera and the lens, you also have to manually switch on focus peaking. So what I typically do is I define one of the function buttons, so that I can, when I'm using one of these dumb lenses, I can enable it. So I typically do the B options, or button and dial settings. I go function 2, and then I set that for peaking. And then all you do is when you're focusing, when you get the lens in, you just push the button, the peaking switches on, and then you can focus the lens. And when you see the color shift and color changes, then that's when you can tell things are in focus. Third thing that you need to set with these lenses, because like I say they're not connected in any electronic way to the camera, is for image stabilization. And that's one of the great things about being able to use old legacy lenses and also other lenses with adapters, is because the Olympus cameras have in-body image stabilization. You can set that up and you get image stabilization on incredibly old lenses. So you can shoot old telephoto lenses that you could buy off eBay, any legacy camera lenses you might have, you can use those. So for that, the setting that I use there is it's under the C options, which is release, image stabilize, still IS. I use SIS Auto, and then what you do is you have to go and when you have manual lenses, you have to set the focal length of the lens. So you go in there and set the focal length of the lens to whatever it is. That really is one of the challenges when you're using zoom lenses. So you need to set it a specific zoom focal length and then punch those numbers in to make the image stabilization work. As I mentioned, we've got these. I'll put them into the notes at the end of the call. At the end of the video. So, talking just a little bit about these two adapters that I'm going to talk about today. The first one is in this little bag here. So this is a Fotasy 25mm f1.4 TV movie lens and adapter that I got from Amazon. And the lens is tiny, as you can see. I can get it a bit closer and you can see how tiny it really is. There you go. So you can see this little tiny thing. So this was like about 30 bucks off of Amazon. So I don't know if you can see. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. The lens has aperture. This is the aperture ring for it, and this here, I don't know if you can see where it says. Let me just go in a little bit closer. I don't know if you can see, but it says near far. This is the focusing, and I had to send one back because the focusing wasn't too great. But these little lenses, so it comes. So this one, if I unscrew this. Take a long time to unscrew. So this is the lens, and this is the adapter that came with it. So all you do is you screw the lens into the adapter. You know, I put one of the back covers on this. Then you just put it into the camera, and away you go. So these are very cheap, and clearly you get what you pay for. What I was looking for with these was because they're very fast lenses. This is an f1.4. So I was using this for taking some nighttime star pictures, which I'll post some examples of what pictures I've taken with these. Main thing about these lenses is if you're at full aperture, the lenses round the outside is very unfocused. It's blurred, but it does actually give quite a nice little effect. So I've taken some portraits with it, and you know, you get a nice, you can get a very shallow depth of field because it's f1.4. You can shoot in low light situations, which is useful, you know, if you're shooting in a church or something. And then for my wedding photography business. And then the other thing that's nice about them is with the distortion around the outside. It's very nice for portraits and things like that. So the lens is very good, and it was kind of cheap, and it's just some fun thing to play with. And you know, since it's incredibly small, it just fits in my camera bag, and it's kind of useful. So the second adapters I'm going to talk about is this, and this is a Neewer lens mount adapter Nikon G lens to M4/3. It's a bit of a mouthful. It was about 14 bucks off of Amazon. And so what happens with these little guys is, here it is. I'll just hold it up to the camera. Hopefully it'll focus in. You go focus on this little guy. There he goes. So this is, so your lens goes on here, this goes on the back of the camera, and so since this is one is specifically for a G lens, so G lenses, for people who aren't familiar with Nikons, G lenses are the ones that don't have an aperture ring. So when you fasten this to the camera, when you fasten this to the lens, and when you fasten this to the camera, there's no way to set the aperture. But this one, don't know if you can see, it says lock, and you may be able to hear above the birds. There's a little ring that you can use, and that will actually adjust the aperture settings. So so with this one, so like I say, the other thing that's interesting about these, and this is what I was talking about before about the Micro Four Thirds cameras, is that you need a little bit of width to allow for the fact that the sensor is very close in here, and you know, these Nikon lenses are designed to go through a mirror and up and into the, you know, if the sensor is further back in the camera body. So with these, you just put the lens on this end, and you put this into the camera, and away you go. So I've been using this one with my with some of my older lenses that I have. I have, no, not an older lens actually, I take that back. It's a, I might have the box, do I have the box? Not anymore. So it's a Tamron, I think it's, I want to say it's 80 to 300 millimeter lens. So effective focal length at 300 millimeters is 600 millimeters. And I used it to take a couple of pictures of some bunny rabbits that were in the next field to where our house is. So I'll put some of those pictures up. Again, the important thing is to set the image stabilization so it has the right focal length, and then I was taking these shots and I'll put all the exposure details up, and you'll be able to see what they are. But it worked pretty good. So so just to summarize, the first thing is with adapters is they're dumb. So you have to either be in manual exposure mode, or you can get away with aperture priority mode. They're dumb, they don't pass any information between the camera and the lens. So image stabilization, if you have an image stabilization in the lens, so for instance here's one of my Nikon lenses that has image stabilization in the lens. Those don't work. You have to use image stabilization in the camera body. So there's no electrical connections, so there's no autofocus, there's no exposure, all that good stuff. And then the other thing is that you also need to set the image stabilization focal length to be able to take advantage of the in-body stabilization. As I said, the Neewer lens mount is great because it allows me to use any of my legacy lenses, and it works very good. And these closed circuit TV movie lens, whatever you want to call them, there are like hundreds of different ones on Amazon. These are very good for low light shooting, for arty stuff, a bit like Holger and those kind of shoots as well. Anyway, hope this has been informative. I'm Paul Higgins, and this is Paul Higgins Photography. I'll see you next time. Take care.